Hi, my name is Angela Givens. Thank you for joining me today as we take a look at concept development and strategic learning. First, I would like to thank our paraprofessionals in the classrooms, kindergarten through second grade. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Your help is tremendous, and we really appreciate everything that you do. Today we're going to take a look at concept development and strategic learning. What we're going to do is we're going to separate these two, take a look at what exactly they are, what it looks like in the classroom, what the strategies and techniques are used to teach these objects, and also what kind of activities can we expect to see. So I'm going to begin with concept development. This is when the student is allowed to expand or refine their knowledge that they previously have on certain topics. It also allows them to generate new ideas on subjects. Concept development is divided up into 5 types of concepts. The first is simple. Simple concepts can be seen, touched, heard. An example of a simple complex would be a lamp or a wooden block. Um, the next type of concept we have is the complex concept. Complex is something that may be a little bit different depending on the way the terms that it's used and how it fits in the situation. An example of this would be love. Maybe your love you have for a spouse is very different than a love you would have for a parent or maybe even a child. Um, so the complex ones aren't as cut and dry as the simple ones. The complex concepts also have 3 different types of complex concepts: verbal, nonverbal, and process. An example for verbal would be one such as friendship. You can tell through the communication and that type of thing that someone appreciates you, so you would be able to use friendship as an example for that one. Nonverbal would be something you would see such through mental pictures. An example of that would be like the mass of something or the volume of a can, something like that, something that's not tangible, but you can kind of see it in your head and kind of map it out in your head. And process are learned methods. Those are examples of like photosynthesis and certain processes that you see over time. So concept development, when it's being taught in the classroom, one thing you'll really see is um, a big white piece of paper or a smartboard or a chalkboard, something being used, and it's going to be divided into sections. They will have a bottom part that has the generalizations on it, and the sections kind of divide up the words, the ideas into certain categories. Usually students have copies of this or they're recreating them maybe in notebooks. You'll see several different colors. It kind of helps keep them all separated. And a lot of times it's encouraged for the students to actually do the writing. That way the teacher can focus on where the conversation is leading to. Here's an example of a layout that you would see when discussing concept development. You'll have your list, your group and label, your subsume, and your regroup. So you would go through and make out your list of the words that kind of go along with what you're discussing, maybe group them, label them. You would then go through and figure out, does this one need to be over here? Do I need to redo this? And then you'll be able to make a generalization about it. The strategies that are used, of course, you need to first determine what concept you're going to teach. Secondly, it's very efficient to have non-examples and examples. It's recommended that you have 3 good examples for every one non-example. This just makes it a little more clear for the children to understand, this applies and this doesn't. It's very important to assess their prior knowledge. You don't want to spend a lot of time teaching on something that they have possibly already learned or that the class has a good understanding of. And then you'll see a lot of activities and graphic organizers too. So some of the techniques that would be used, the turn and talk, this is where students will turn to their neighbor and discuss what options they got, maybe make some tweaks to their list, get some good discussion going on. Think, pair, and share is a little bit like the turn and talk, but a little different. Um, this you pair up together and discuss your ideas and questions you might have, and then you meet with another pair and you discuss those all together, and then you go back and you report what was shared. Also, another technique that's used is scaffolding. These are when you use several different teaching techniques and you push the student closer to independent work, the further you get into the discussion. So some of the activities you would probably see in class, if we were doing mathematics, maybe we would be classifying mathematical objects. So we would maybe have cylinders and spheres and, um, bricks, that type of thing. And we'd be creating different categories. What do they have in common? What don't they have in common? Um, how is that versus 2D, two-dimensional types of projects. So you'll really see a lot of classifying, and then we can use those categories to help us build our definitions. For vocabulary, you'd see list, group, and label. So, for example, if we were reading a book, you would go through and with the students, have them view the book focusing only on the title and the illustrations, and then you would have them develop a list of what kind of words they can expect to see. For example, if you're reading The Tortoise and the Hare, you would probably expect to see something about a race, something about a tortoise and a hare, obviously. Maybe it takes place in a forest. You would make a list of the words you would expect to see. Then you go back and you will read the book, and you can get rid of any words that you thought you might find in the book and you didn't. And you can also add any words that you didn't expect to find but did. Doing that, you can kind of readjust your categories and it will help you come up to a different list of your vocab words. An example of science would be sink or float. Students will guess which items will sink or float. Once it's been completed, they will look at all the ones that did sink and see what characteristics they have in common, as well as all the ones that floated and what characteristics that has in common. This will help them in the future determining whether something would sink or float. They would have those certain characteristics to look for. An example for social studies would be, say we've just done a unit over Native Americans. So we would have the students create a list of words that relate to Native Americans and then look up those pictographs. And eventually we would want the student to be able to create some sort of sentence or phrase using the pictographs. So moving on to strategic learning. Strategic learning encourages the students to become better learners by using different strategies, understanding text, uh, problem solving abilities, generating new ideas, that type of thing. So this is something that we would hope that all our students would eventually attain. It looks like in the classroom that you would be set up in small groups. There would be a lot of discussion. You would see either clusters of desks together or maybe tables if those are available. Another thing that was really common is a strategy of the day board. Each day you could put a new strategy on there, something that a little task or reminder that would help them think of some think of a common problem in a new light, new ways to look at it. And this will eventually leave them with several options when it comes to, um, choosing which strategy they want to use to complete the task. You would also want to see plenty of room for students to walk around, especially students with learning disabilities. Strategic learning, it is a fun process, but it's also a very deep thinking process. We would definitely want to have for all students some sort of release or brain break, but especially those for with learning disabilities that maybe get frustrated really easily when working on this type of work. Some of the strategies you would see is like substituting words or paraphrasing. The student could read the words from the text, and then if they're not sure they completely understand it, then maybe try to paraphrase it in simpler words that they understand, just to make sure they're really getting the concept. Real objects in role play is another example. Um, by doing this, they can see the event or the description taking place as it happens or being reenacted. A good example of this would be like a house area in a kindergarten playroom. They're sitting there and they're learning about the different tools in the kitchen and how those can be used. Or maybe they have read about a certain way that you're ironing clothes, and they can use that to kind of reenact that. The techniques that we see used are also led by students most often. This allows them to really make sure they've got a grasp on the concepts, and also allows the instructor to really focus in on the groups, make sure they're understanding what's being said. Also, when you're presenting to the class, you'll want to make sure to take frequent pauses. This will allow the students time to review what you've said, summarize. They can either do this mentally or maybe they want to write it down. It's just another chance for that information to kind of settle within them. You'll see lots of worksheets or handouts with charts and graphs, agree or disagree statements, maybe matching people or places with information and about them. Some learning activities you will see will be like vocab. Kidspage.com is said to have great games that allow you to match pictures to words. It's also said to have less annoying music and less ads, so that's always a plus for us with the young ones. So this would be a way to kind of develop that vocabulary or enrich it. In mathematics, playing games, like I found this game called the Number Line Madness. You use fraction cards and you help, you use these cards and you add and you subtract using the number line, and then whoever gets to one wins. So I thought that was kind of a fun, unique game that could be played. For social studies, if we have discussed several topics, say we were studying just off the top of my head the Civil War, which probably wouldn't be discussed at this age level, but maybe something along those lines. Um, you can review the information that you've discussed by offering multiple choice questions. In this activity, instead of just having a worksheet, you have certain corners of the room labeled A, B, C, or D, and the students go to that section of the room. It's a very interactive game. I think it would be lots of fun to play, as well as helping the students kind of remember that information. I know I am a person that a lot of times when I'm trying to recall something, I think about where I was, what was that environment around me. I think this would be a great way to kind of add that for some of our kiddos too. And finally, a science activity you might see is discussion over fossils. So you could have the students create a fossil imprint, have them compare them. What do they have in common? What are different? And really get into that. The model building. For example, as this one, you could use fossil fuel formation. Just anything that really brings that discussion to life. Again, I couldn't thank you for enough for doing what you do. We wouldn't be able to do any of this without you. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Have a great afternoon.